Sometimes the smallest chair holds the biggest story. What would you do if a stranger's quiet dignity was stripped away in plain sight? Let us know in the comments section below, and don't forget to subscribe as we bring this powerful story to life. Kylie Jennings was not having a great morning. Her shift at the Elm and Iron Café in downtown Fair Ridge had barely begun, and already the espresso machine was acting up again, sputtering like it had asthma. The mobile orders were stacking up faster than the tickets could print, and Kevin, the kid who usually handled the register, had called in emotionally overwhelmed again, whatever that meant. Kylie wiped a smudge of caramel syrup off her apron and scowled at the iPad as another 3 mobile lattes flooded the screen. She didn't hate her job. Well, maybe she did a little, but she hated the people more. The tourists, the influencers with their filters and faux grins, the regulars who acted like buying a $6.00 cappuccino entitled them to VIP treatment. And then there were the old-timers, the ones who came in and sat for hours nursing a single coffee like it was vintage wine, taking up the best spots in the cafe like it was some kind of retirement lodge. She glanced over to the corner near the front window, the sunniest, warmest spot in the entire cafe. And of course, there he was. Earl Barkley. Same table, same cup of black coffee, same neatly pressed flannel shirt. The old guy always arrived early, always took that table, and always sat alone, his newspaper folded in 3 in his right sleeve pinned neatly just below the shoulder. Kylie had heard whispers that he was a veteran, that he'd lost his arm in the war. Vietnam, maybe, but that didn't entitle him to act like the place was his private reading room. The bell over the door jingled, snapping Kylie's attention back to the present. A small group of tourists bustled in, chattering loudly. Scarves, sunglasses, cameras, the whole stereotype. "Excuse me," said the woman leading the group, her tone overly bright, fake sweet, in that customer service kid-of way. "Do you think we could get that table by the window? We're only in town for a day, and the light is just perfect for photos." Kylie didn't even hesitate. She wiped her hands on her apron, rounded the counter, and marched toward Earl. She could feel the stares already, those awkward anticipatory looks from customers who knew something unpleasant was about to happen, but pretended not to notice. "Hi, sir," Kylie said, leaning in with a tight smile. "I'm sorry, but we're a little busy this morning, and we have a group that needs this table. Would you mind relocating to one of the smaller ones near the back?" Earl looked up slowly. His eyes were pale and steady, the kind that had seen too much and didn't bother blinking at discomfort. He didn't speak right away, just gently folded the corner of his newspaper and placed it beside his cup. "That table's a bit cold," he said calmly, nodding toward the shadowed corner near the bathrooms. "I usually sit here, easier on the joints. I've got a bit of arthritis in the shoulder where, well," he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Kylie's smile didn't budge. "I understand, but we do have to make room for larger groups during rush hours. It's cafe policy." It wasn't. But Kylie didn't care. Earl hesitated, then gave a single nod. No argument, no fuss, just quiet resignation. He gathered his newspaper, lifted his half-finished cup of coffee with his left hand, and moved with deliberate grace toward the back of the cafe. The group swarmed his old table before he was even fully out of the seat, the woman already positioning her latte and her sunglasses just right for the perfect candid shot. No one clapped. No one said thank you. At the register, Rachel Monroe paused mid-sip of her tea. She hadn't meant to listen in. She hadn't meant to feel anything more than mild second-hand embarrassment. But something about the way Earl had stood, no bitterness, no indignation, just that quiet endurance, bothered her. Rachel was used to spotting power dynamics. As a civil rights attorney, her job was to see what most people ignored, the everyday slights, the quiet humiliations, the slow corrosion of dignity. And this wasn't just a seating change. It was a message. She watched Earl sit down again at the table in the back, now in shadow, flanked by a garbage bin on one side and the sound of a leaky faucet from the nearby restroom. The space around him felt colder than it looked. He didn't open his newspaper again. Just sat still, his expression unreadable. Rachel's eyes shifted to Kylie, who was now laughing with the tourists as she took their order. She tapped their payment through with cheerful ease, then ducked back behind the counter as if nothing had happened at all. Rachel set her tea down. She stood. Something deep in her stirred. Not rage exactly, but something adjacent, something that couldn't stay seated. She didn't know Earl's story, not yet, but she knew that people like him didn't always get second chances at being seen, and she wasn't about to let this one disappear into the corner. Not without a fight. Rachel Monroe didn't move immediately. She stood still, one hand resting on the lip of her ceramic tea mug, her mind turning over the moment like a coin between her fingers. She had seen subtle discrimination before, most of it quiet, often excused as policy or procedure, or the ever-popular fallback, "We didn't mean anything by it." But meaning didn't matter when harm was done, and what she had just witnessed wasn't neutral. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was something deeper. It was disregard. Earl Barkley hadn't protested. He hadn't scowled or argued or even sighed. That was the part that had haunted her. The way he just accepted it. Rachel pushed her mug aside and walked with quiet purpose to the counter. Tyler was back behind the bar, distractedly topping off whipped cream on a peppermint mocha. Her apron now dusted with cocoa powder. She didn't notice Rachel until she was just a few feet away. "Hey," Rachel said, her tone polite but precise, the way it always was when she was about to dismantle someone's logic without raising her voice. Kylie looked up. "Oh, hi there. Can I get you something?" Rachel tilted her head slightly. "No. Just wanted to ask, why did you move that gentleman from his table?" Kylie blinked, caught off guard. "Oh. Well, he was just one person, and we had a big group come in. It made more sense to give them the larger spot, you know." Rachel didn't smile. "You mean the veteran? The man who sits there every day? The one with one arm?" Kylie gave a little shrug, half defensive, half dismissive. "Look, it's not personal. I didn't know he was a veteran or whatever. It's just that group asked, and I had to keep the line moving. It's not like I kicked him out." "No," Rachel said slowly. "You just moved him like he didn't matter." Kylie rolled her eyes slightly and returned to steaming milk, signaling that the conversation was, at least in her mind, over. Rachel stood there another second longer, then turned and walked away, but not to her seat. She made her way toward the corner where Earl now sat, the hum of the restroom's fan faint in the background. He didn't look up as she approached. His coffee had gone cold, and his paper sat untouched beside him. "Mind if I join you?" Rachel asked, her voice softer now. Earl lifted his gaze. It was slow, deliberate, but not unfriendly. He nodded once. "It's a free country." Rachel pulled out the chair across from him. She noticed the way he turned his shoulders slightly to avoid bumping into the wall beside him, how he shifted to keep his balance without using his right side. The movement was so smooth, she knew it came from habit, not struggle. "I saw what happened," she said, not immediately offering pity. "And I'm sorry for how it was handled." Earl offered a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nothing to be sorry about. That girl's just doing her job." "She may be doing her job," Rachel replied, "but that doesn't excuse doing it badly." He looked at her more closely now. There was curiosity there, and maybe a trace of guarded caution. "You a journalist?" he asked. "Lawyer." His brows lifted slightly. "Civil?" She nodded. "Mostly civil rights. Veterans advocacy, too, when I can." Earl gave a short, dry chuckle. "That so?" They sat in a silence that didn't feel awkward. Rachel let it hang. She was used to the tempo of quiet clients, of people who'd spent too long going unseen. After a moment, Earl said, "You know, I don't come here for the coffee." "Figured. I come because there's a certain comfort in routine. Familiar walls, same faces. Place feels like it belongs to everyone." Rachel leaned forward slightly. Until it doesn't. He met her gaze. Exactly. Behind them, the tourists at the front table were now taking turns snapping photos, with the city's streetcar visible through the glass. Kylie brought them another round of pastries on the house. Rachel turned her eyes back to Earl. "Do you mind if I speak to the manager?" she asked. Earl considered that. "I don't want trouble." "I don't either," Rachel said. "But I do want respect, and you deserve that, at the very least." He gave her a look, not disapproval, not encouragement either, just permission, the kind of quiet nod that said, "If you're going to stand up, do it properly." Rachel rose again and made her way past the counter toward the staff hallway that led to the kitchen. She glanced at the name tag on the shift board pinned behind the espresso machine. David Tran, manager on duty. A young man in his early 30s emerged a minute later when she asked for him. He wore a ball cap, tattoos on both forearms, and a look that said he'd rather be anywhere else. "Something wrong, ma'am?" "I'd like to talk about what just happened with your employee and the gentleman." She displaced from his seat. David glanced past her toward Earl. "She didn't mean anything by it, just trying to keep things moving." "I'm not here to file a complaint," Rachel interrupted. "I'm here to suggest that if your cafe has regulars, especially veterans with visible injuries, perhaps you could train your staff to handle situations with more empathy. Because right now, what she did wasn't just a customer service mistake. It was a public disrespect of someone who served this country." David scratched the back of his head, uncomfortable now. Rachel didn't let up. "I know businesses have to balance seating, timing, flow. I get it. But if you want this place to be more than just a stop for overpriced coffee, you have to decide what kind of values you're serving with every cup." David exhaled and nodded slowly. "You're right. I'll talk to her. And to him. Make it right." "Good," Rachel said, her voice firm but even. "Do that." When she returned to Earl, he was still sitting quietly, but the shadow of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Lawyer, huh?" he said. She shrugged, lowering herself back into the chair. "Just someone who thinks you shouldn't have to ask twice for dignity." But this time, Earl chuckled. A deeper sound, less bitter. Maybe, just maybe, the cold corner felt a little warmer now. David Tran had never considered himself the confrontational type. He prided himself on being the cool manager, the one who gave extra shots without charging, who covered shifts without complaint, who kept things moving without stirring the pot. But something about the way the lawyer had looked at him, steady, calm, expecting better, had hit a nerve. He stood just outside the staff hallway, his arms crossed, tapping his fingers against his bicep, staring toward the front of the cafe. Kylie was wiping down the counter, a bounce in her step as if nothing unusual had happened. The tourists were laughing, their table now cluttered with plates and phone cases and selfie sticks. And Earl sat in the corner, a man apart. Not bitter, not dramatic, just displaced. David took a breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked toward the bar. "Kylie," he said quietly, leaning in. She looked up, confused. "Yeah, come to the back for a minute." Her smile faltered. She followed him reluctantly, glancing once toward the front, then at the table where Earl sat, as if piecing together what this was about. Inside the cramped office, David shut the door behind them. "You moved Mr. Barkley from his seat," he began, his tone level. "What?" Kylie crossed her arms. "I had a group come in. They needed space. He's a regular, you know that." "It was just one guy," she said, shrugging, "and he didn't seem to mind." "Ill-minded." David corrected. "There's a difference." Kylie let out a sigh. "Okay, fine, I get it. He's a vet or something. I wasn't trying to disrespect anyone." "You didn't have to try." "You just did." David leaned on the edge of the desk. "He comes in every day. Same time, same seat. He lost his arm in service. That spot by the window? That's not just his favorite table. It's his one damn moment of peace." Kylie's arms dropped to her sides. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," David replied, "which is almost worse." She blinked. Her face had softened, guilt finally filtering in. "What do you want me to do?" "Fix it," David said simply. "Not because I said so, but because it's the right thing to do." Kylie looked at the floor for a moment, then nodded. Back out on the floor, Rachel noticed the pair emerging from the back. She didn't say anything, just sipped her now lukewarm tea and observed. Kylie moved tentatively toward Earl's table, the bounce from earlier entirely gone. Mr. Barkley," she began. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For earlier. I wasn't thinking, and I should have asked or explained or done literally anything else but what I did." Earl looked at her for a long time, not cruelly, just with the weight of someone who'd had to listen to too many apologies from people who didn't understand what they were apologizing for. "I've been coming here a while," he said. "Most people don't even know my name." "I know it now," Kylie said, quieter, "and I'll make sure the others do too. That table, it's yours. Every day, no matter what." He gave a small nod, then, to her surprise, a faint smile. "Thank you." As Kylie turned to leave, David approached Earl next. "Mr. Barkley," he said, "I want to personally apologize on behalf of the café. That shouldn't have happened. I failed to train my staff properly, and you deserved better." Earl nodded again. "I appreciate you saying that." Rachel watched this unfold with quiet satisfaction, but what happened next surprised even her. David turned to the group of tourists, still seated at Earl's old table. "Excuse me, folks," he said. "I hate to interrupt, but I'm going to ask if you'd be willing to relocate to another table. We had a mix-up earlier, and that window seat actually belongs to one of our regulars." The woman leading the group looked confused at first, then annoyed. "But we've already ordered." "You're absolutely welcome to stay," David said with practiced professionalism. "But I'd like to correct a mistake we made. That table has been Mr. Barkley's for over 3 years. It's part of what makes this café feel like home. I hope you understand." The group exchanged glances. A couple of them looked genuinely embarrassed. "Yes," the woman finally said, standing up. "Of course. We didn't know." David helped them move their drinks to another table closer to the back. Then, without fanfare, he returned to Earl's table. "Whenever you're ready," he said, nodding toward the sunny window seat, now empty. Earl didn't rush. He looked toward Rachel first, then slowly stood, carrying his paper and coffee. It was a quiet walk, not a victory lap, but something more dignified than that. When he sat back down at the window, it was as though the air itself settled around him differently. Like a displaced weight had finally returned to its rightful place. Rachel stood, gathering her coat and mug. "Leaving already?" Earl asked, folding the paper beside him. "I've said what needed to be said," she replied. "The rest is yours now." He gave a small, respectful nod. "You're a good lawyer." "I'm a better neighbor," she replied with a small smile. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Barkley." As Rachel stepped outside, the door chimed behind her. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Inside, Earl looked out the window. His reflection met his gaze, one arm gone, the other steady on his cup. But he didn't see absence anymore. He saw presence. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a ghost in his own town. The next morning, the bell over the door of Elm and Iron Café rang at exactly 8:06 a.m., just as it had nearly every morning for the past 4 years. Earl Barkley stepped inside, his left hand gripping the handle, his right sleeve folded and pinned just below the shoulder seam. The café was quieter today. No clusters of tourists, no social media photo shoots in progress, no faces buried in screens pretending not to notice the world around them. He glanced toward the window seat. No one was there. The sunlight slanted in at just the right angle, spreading across the table like a welcome mat, spilling warmth over the wood. His table. It was waiting. Earl made his way to the counter. Before he could say a word, Kylie greeted him with a nod in a tone that was steady, not performative. "Morning, Mr. Barkley. Your usual—" Earl studied her face. No trace of forced cheer, no trace of yesterday's guilt. Just simple, genuine respect. "Yes, thank you," he said. "And it's on the house today," Kylie added. "Manager's orders." Earl raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "Don't argue," she said with a faint smile. "I already rang it through." David appeared from the back a moment later, carrying a tray of pastries. He nodded at Earl, not as a formality, but as an acknowledgement. "Good to see you, sir." Earl tipped his head. "Same to you." He took his coffee and returned to the sunlit table. The warmth coming through the glass felt richer today, more earned. He unfolded his paper, smoothed the creases, and took a long sip from his cup. 10 minutes passed before the door chimed again. Rachel Monroe stepped in, a legal pad tucked beneath her arm and her hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She scanned the café briefly before her eyes landed on him. Earl waved her over without standing. "You again," he said with a small smirk. She sat across from him. "I figured I'd stop by and see if they'd actually followed through." "They did," Earl said, lifting his cup slightly. "You rattled their bones." "I nudged a few, sure, but you being here, you did the rest." Earl chuckled quietly. "Funny, isn't it? 30 years ago, people couldn't stop thanking me for what I did over there. These days, I have to fight for a chair." Rachel leaned in, resting her forearms on the table. "People forget, not always out of malice. Sometimes it's just the world moving fast, making too much noise. They stop seeing the quiet people, the ones who've earned their place." Earl looked out the window. "Well, I'm still here. Just trying to hold on to the last bit of routine. And you should never have to explain why." They sipped in silence for a moment. Then Rachel said, "You know, I have a friend who runs a local paper. They've got a community column, human interest pieces. She's always looking for stories." Earl raised a brow. "You're not trying to put my face in the news, are you?" "Only if you let me," Rachel said. "But I think people around here could stand to hear this story. Maybe it reminds them of something they've forgotten." Earl considered that, then gave a slow nod. "I'll think about it." Rachel smiled. "That's all I ask." The café continued its morning rhythm around them, orders called out, cups steaming, the hiss of milk being frothed. But this morning felt different. There was a new stillness under the activity, a kind of reverence that hadn't existed the day before. At 9:12 a.m., a young couple walked in with their daughter in tow. The little girl, maybe 7 or 8, tugged at her mother's sleeve and whispered, "That's him, Mama, the man from the story." Rachel turned to Earl, surprised. "You told someone?" He shook his head. "Nope." The mother approached their table hesitantly. "Excuse me, sir. I just wanted to say thank you. My husband's a Marine. Still active duty. We read about what happened here, on the community bulletin. I think someone posted about it after overhearing yesterday." Earl nodded slowly. "Tell your husband I said Semper Fi." The woman smiled. "We will." The little girl stepped forward and handed him a small folded piece of paper with crayon drawings and the words "Thank you" in large, blocky letters. Earl blinked, his throat tightening. "That's real nice, sweetheart." Rachel watched him take the paper carefully, like it was something sacred. The girl beamed, then skipped back to her parents. "You might be famous after all," Rachel said. "Let's not go that far," Earl replied, but he tucked the paper into his pocket like a medal. By midday, the regulars had begun to trickle in, faces Earl recognized but hadn't spoken to in years. One man clapped him on the shoulder and said, "About time people remembered who you are." Another woman brought him a cookie from the bakery down the block, wrapped in wax paper. David later taped a small laminated sign to the edge of the window table. It read, "Reserved daily for Mr. Earl Barkley, with thanks for your service." Earl saw it, said nothing, and smiled. When Rachel stood to leave, she looked down at him one last time. "You ever need anything, legal or otherwise, you know how to reach me." "Appreciate it," Earl said. "I think I'll be just fine for now." As she left, the door chimed again, and the café returned to its hum. Earl sat back, coffee in hand, newspaper folded in his lap, the morning light warm across his chest. He watched the street outside, people coming and going, the world moving on. But this time, it moved around him, not past him. And for the first time in a long while he felt seen. Not because he raised his voice, not because he demanded it, but because, finally, someone else had. Justice didn't always come with sirens or courtrooms. Sometimes it came with a simple chair and a name. Restored, respected, remembered.